biggest story the world has ever known. The rise and rise of Bitcoin. 2022.
A single chance for the world, a single moment in time.
I never knew the story of how did you get in Bitcoin Cash.
I was an e-liquid manufacturer, and I saw just a little bit of excitement happening online about cryptocurrency as a whole. So I decided I downloaded the Exodus wallet and was trying to accept it as a vendor. And I purchased just a couple $100 worth here and there, but it was spread out across, like I had some Bitcoin, I had Litecoin, I had Digibyte, I had something called Aeon, which I'm pretty sure was like a fork of XMR, I had some Monero, and I was in a Facebook group that was an anarchist Facebook group, and people had argued about like what their favorite coins were, but someone had just like pushed me towards Bitcoin Cash. So I remember joining the Bitcoin Cashers Discord. So like the fork had already happened, and I joined the Discord, and I'm still kind of skeptical of everything, but I realized like, there's these online merchants where I can actually use this one as money, and the other one's not really the case. There was a little bit of Bitcoin online merchant adoption, and same with Litecoin. But when I went to actually use Bitcoin, I don't even think it was to buy something. I think I was trying to just transfer it over in Exodus to another currency. The fee was like $50, and I was like, well, as a merchant, like, yeah, I'm not the one that's going to take the most of this cost, but why would anyone want to use this when they're buying something from me? So like just over time, it ended up being like getting more and more funneled into Bitcoin Cash, just because it was more useful to me than any of the other currencies. And I mean, Canadian dollars are great, but I remember like a couple months later, like reading the white paper and going, oh, okay, something clicked, like all the gears came together, right? And I was like, oh, like Bitcoin Jason always talks about the why. Once someone has the why, you don't really need to hold their hand anymore. And that really felt like the case, where I went from just watching what everyone in these Facebook groups or what people online were saying about cryptocurrency, and just going like, I get it now. Everything that I had been exposed to for the past 6 months, 8 months or something was just people excited to make a little bit more fiat. And while I think that kind of drew me in at the very start, I wasn't convinced, because I wasn't making like a big amounts of money in those couple months, especially with all the fees and stuff. So yeah, I think it was just trying to get an advantage inside of a niche market already, and then slowly realizing the advantage isn't there if people have to pay ridiculous amounts to use what's the advantage, right?
Yeah. So were you already a developer when discovering all of this?
No. So, I mean, kind of, but not worth a grain of salt, realistically. Like, I participated in a couple hackathons, but nothing that, like, I didn't know how to communicate what I was taught or what I was doing, and I didn't fully understand myself what I was doing. So I knew just enough, and I knew how to Google the right things to make something work, but when it came to sharing that or trying to improve it or optimize it, everything just fell flat. And I remember I think it was called the BCH DevCon 3. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. So the very first hackathon, I was trying to do the IOZ candy machine mimic, and I was using an ESP8266 little microcontroller. You can program them with the Arduino software, and didn't really get anywhere with that. The deadline came to submit, and the most I could do is I could get the light on the microcontroller to blink. So cool, an action is happening. You send it a Bitcoin transaction and something's happening, but it wasn't what I wanted to happen. So I spent a couple more months outside of the hackathon just trying to make it work. And I eventually got to a point where I purchased a 3D printer, also figured out just enough to make like a shell of a candy machine, and ended up essentially giving a demo to my sisters and being like, hey, they're very young. Here's a candy machine that we can have in the house. And my plan was like, if I could get them to do some chores around the house, I'll give them a little allowance in Bitcoin Cash, and then they can go and use it on the candy machine, and then I get that back, and shit gets done. But I moved out not too long after, so a little here and there. there. But I participated in hackathons since then, and every time I felt like I was getting a little more experienced, a little better. I could communicate with people a little better. So I started actually collaborating with people. So that first one I did just alone. The second one I did with a guy named Christian and someone that I know in real life named Nick. And we had made a point of sale system for Spice tokens, which were, I think, one of the original and most popular SLP tokens on Bitcoin Cash. And we just set it up so that it was a web page and kind of like the Bitcoin.com cash register app, where you just give a payout address and it shows you the like real-time conversion rates. So people just say like, oh, the price of this thing is, 25 Canadian dollars, and then it would show the price in Spice tokens, give you a QR code, and you could pay for things that way. That quickly got abandoned. Like as soon as the hackathon was over, people were like, nah, we're not going to do this anymore. So the very last hackathon that I took part in was Coin Toys. So it was I worked with a team of people from Texas, and the problem statement was like, okay, you have online sex workers who are getting maybe 30% of their overall gross income in their pocket, because the processors, the websites were taking anywhere from 60 to 70%. And so what if we just had a way that they could bypass all of that? And so using the same kind of Arduino approach, we built a little circuit that would activate a vibrator if someone sent a Bitcoin Cash transaction to it. And then we were like, okay, well, what if we made, threshold, like limits do different things? So that side of things never quite got completed, but we actually got, a working product by the end of the hackathon. And that same hackathon was when Only Coins and I think there was another more adult content website that was partaking in the hackathon. But it was like very clear to me, like there's a use case that solves a problem. And even now I'm still trying, like I am trying to get a hold of those guys again, because I don't know much about actual manufacturing. Like I can do 3D printing stuff, but that doesn't scale, right? So it's all hobbyist level. Yeah, that's still, it seems like a very wide open gap in the market to be like, okay, we can cut out the middleman for all this entirely. After the hackathon was done, or I guess no, even during the hackathon, people were like pushing me to get more and more involved in software. After we didn't, I think we took like 4th place in that hackathon. So we didn't get a whole lot we didn't get any of the overall prize pool of money, but we got people donating to our group just because they thought it was impressive. And the more I kind of talked about it, the more people were like, well, you should start a Flipstarter. And I knew what Flipstarter was, but I was like, well, me pursuing an education in software development doesn't offer returns to anyone else, right? It's just cool. I get to put an extra thing on a resume or whatever the case may be. So I was very hesitant, I think, to launch the Flipstarter, but I think you pushed me quite a bit into getting it going. And yeah, I remember I talked about it on the podcast, and I think I had set the deadline for 2 months, and in less than a week it was completely funded. So I was like, okay, well, I have to go now. It's not like, and I outlined in the entire Flipstarter, you can't expect returns on this. I'll do what I can, but my goal is to work inside the Bitcoin Cash community and try and make something cool. Yeah, I did a 13-week boot camp with a school called Lighthouse Labs out of Montreal, and within a month after I graduated from that, I got a job at the current company that I'm at, but it's still not in the Bitcoin Cash space. So I think that's the next goal for me.
Pretty cool.
We're coming for you, Banks.